House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, now for weeks, the Speaker trying to play petty political games with this nation and the State of the Union and the President. By the way, what is she fighting for? The President's fighting life and death. The President's fighting safety and security. Well, she has barred the President from performing his constitutional duty in the House chamber, making her the first Speaker in U.S. history to ever do so. Now, she refused to compromise on budget negotiations, wouldn't even come to the table to talk about any kind of deal. She's been too busy on her luxurious vacations. Other Democrats on a lobbyist-paid junket, again, luxurious locations and resorts, planning taxpayer-funded excursions around the globe, and to even talk to the President, who has offered dramatic compromises, things she has said over the years she wants, and she has no time for that. But today, the President, he rose above her bitter, petty, partisan gamesmanship. He postponed the State of the Union. Some seem upset by this. They want the President to go to an alternative location, but I think it's a bad idea. Why? Because the President, to give up the grandeur, giving the State of the Union in the House chamber, Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States. That is a powerful moment. You have congressmen and women and senators literally staking out their seats so they can shake the President's hand 14 hours ahead of time. No other place can match that symbolic location, the grandeur, and this President deserves nothing less, and I'm sure that will happen in the near future. This is about so much more, though, than politics. This is about your safety, your security. This is about the safety of the country and literally life and death. Now, this is about a president fulfilling a promise to secure our southern border. This is about saving American lives that are impacted by gangs, cartels, drugs, violence. This is life and death. People are dying. 90% of that heroin that gets into this country comes from that border. It's about 10,000 new migrants now obtaining visas from the government of Mexico to travel through the country in order to make their way north into our country because we have unsecured borders. Now, when the U.S. government is reopened, the President will hold his State of the Union where it belongs in the House chambers, with members of both parties hopefully present. In the meantime, the shutdown does continue. The President has been unrelenting, fighting to make the country safer. Democrats continue to feed their insatiable appetite, this pathological hatred, this division that they have. And, of course, it's always about a desire for power. And breaking tonight, the White House is reportedly now drafting a national emergency order and allocating $7 billion for that wall that would require zero congressional approval. And today, the President reassured Americans that he will get guaranteed funds for the wall one way or another. Let's take a look.
Well, one of the ideas suggested is they open it, they pay a sort of a prorated down payment for the wall, which I think people will agree that you need. You need the wall. I have other alternatives if I have to, and I'll use those alternatives if I have to. We want to go through the system. We have to have a wall in this country. We have criminals pouring into our country. We have no choice but to have a wall or a barrier. And if we don't have that, it's just not going to work.
Again, I ask, what is Nancy Pelosi fighting for? What's in the best interest of the country? Now, President Trump remains ready, willing to negotiate with the Democratic leadership. The White House doors, they're wide open. He's willing to compromise, as he has shown time and again. He's even willing to take a prorated funding rate for the wall for a short period of time, give Congress, again, another chance to do their job and find a resolution. But if the stalemate continues, it's obvious. Democrats refuse to come to the table. The President is clear. He will declare a national emergency and solve the problem himself. It may take some time to fight in the courts, but in my opinion, he will win. And by the way, that will happen. Unfortunately, as we showed you last night, Nancy Pelosi seems to be standing for nothing but being against Trump. During the height of budget negotiations, she and several other top Democrats, they tried to slip away for that 7 days overseas junket, courtesy of you, the taxpayer. And, of course, nothing new for Pelosi. Look at this. According to Judicial Watch, during her last term as Speaker, she racked up a massive travel bill with the U.S. Air Force. Over a 2-year period, she spent more than $2 million of your money on air travel, $100,000 of which was in-flight expenses. That means food and booze for all those politicians for working so hard, like half the year. Thankfully, the president put the kibosh on her most recent overseas junket. And today we did send Fox News contributor, our friend Lawrence Jones, to the streets of New York City to see what Americans really think about the radical, extreme, socialist, Democratic speaker, Nancy Pelosi, and her so-called leadership. Let's take a look.
Trump is the first president in American history to be disinvited from the State of the Union.
Right.
How do you feel about that?
Well, I can't believe it.
Do you feel like it's disgraceful?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I cannot believe that ever happened in the United States.
To try to cancel something because of your politics, you're not
Don't you think
honoring
that's
anyone.
wrong?
Well, yeah, it's wrong.
I think Nancy Pelosi is doing the right thing because Donald Trump is destroying this country by his rhetoric and his racism and a million other things. And I think Nancy Pelosi is the voice of reason in this country.
Do you feel like Nancy Pelosi was wrong?
Yes. I believe the president should attend. It should be his choice whether or not he wants to attend or not attend.
What he's doing to this country is an abomination, and people's rights, human rights, are being violated.
What human rights are being violated?
What human rights?
Yeah, tell me.
The list goes, don't film me, the list goes on and on.
Now, she said that this was because of security, but they said that's not true. Did she tell a lie?
No, she said she had security concerns.
Yeah.
Which I believe she probably does, as the president.
But she didn't talk to the necessary people to figure that out.
It doesn't matter.
Do you think it's eroding the institution? I mean, this doesn't mean that you agree with the president on everything, but this is his report card to the country and to Congress, right?
Well, it looks so childish, you know. And I believe that was a terrible thing that Nancy Pelosi did to the president.
For her to cancel that and go against the Constitution speaks volumes.
So is she throwing a temper tantrum of her own right now?
That's a really good question.
Do you think Nancy Pelosi should take a meeting with the president and get some type of package done?
Of course she should. That's her job. Do your job. Just do your job.
Touting a good question. Oh, what human rights are being violated? They're being violated, whatever they are, they're violated. You can't make this up. Of course, that's New York City, California, New York, not exactly representing red state America. Anyway, sadly, Nancy and Chuck are now being controlled by the most radical, the most extreme elements in the new Socialist Democratic Party. These are the same far-left individuals who are now playing kingmakers in the upcoming 2020 presidential primary. And that brings us to tonight's Hannity Watch report on the 2020 race. We see nearly every single Democrat who's announced their candidacy, the first thing they do is, I got to apologize for this position I had that may sound conservative or you'll hate me. You had Kirsten Gillibrand. She apologized for one supporting the Second Amendment. Then you have Tulsi Gabbard apologizing for her mixed track record on social issues. Yet somehow we're still waiting on Elizabeth Warren's apology for faking and benefiting from the lie of saying she's a Native American. Warren did, however, find some time to propose brand new taxes right there. Check it out. She's always finding new and creative ways to pick your pocket and penalize Americans that she describes as wealthy. Somehow she wants to take that money and redistribute it. And meanwhile, one of Warren's 2020 primary opponents, Senator Kamala Harris, is spending her time raising an enormous amount of money, buying up all the Facebook ads that she can find, and, of course, trashing the president. And she wants him to open up Trump Tower as a shelter to the victims of the shutdown. There are other people that own those units. He actually sold them. They're not his. Take a look.
People are worried about eviction. You know what? Listen, you know what I think should happen? If the president feels this strongly about it, then open up the Trump Tower and let everybody live in there rent-free, and then maybe we can start having a discussion.
I mean,
I bet he's got some rules.
February 1st is going to be rent day for a lot of people who rely on checks from what is supposed to be a good job.
Matter.
All right, Kamala Harris is a member of Congress. She can open up her home. Nancy Pelosi is a multi-millionaire. What do we see when we sent Lawrence to her district? Needles, feces, homeless people everywhere. Why didn't she build the homeless shelter there? Oh, that's right. They're only generous with your money. Now, like you said, it's not a joking matter in this sense. In the coming weeks, this crop of Democrats vying to replace President Trump is likely to get bigger and bigger, but the moderates are nowhere to be found.
One of the ideas suggested is they open it, they pay a sort of a prorated down payment for the wall, which I think people will agree that you need. You need the wall. In fact, I see a lot of the Democrats are almost all of them are breaking, saying, look, walls are good, walls are good.
How is a wall more important than families? The shutdown is not a glitch. It is a crisis that the president alone created and that the president alone can end.
Let's bring in our panel now. Fox News senior judicial analyst Judge Andrew Napolitano, national security analyst Morgan Ortagus, and Jonathan Swan, national political reporter for Axios. The president there asking for a prorated down payment on his wall in a continuing resolution which would fund government for 3 weeks or so. I did the math really quickly. $5.7 billion divided by 365 times 21, $327 million he wants. Can he get that out of the Congress?
Well, I may have an MBA, but I cannot do math in my head the way that you just did.
I did it on the computer.
Good. I think when the American people are looking at this has devolved into a cafeteria food fight with the Democrats in Congress saying, but he started it. And I think that's why people are so frustrated. I think whatever moral argument that Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats felt that they had around Christmas or even 2 weeks ago, for me, that has really evaporated in all of this because, there is no point at this point. We have this many resolutions come to the table that you're not seeing Democrats negotiate with the president, and this standoff is hurting real people. There are real people that I am in the Navy Reserve, that I drill with, that are federal agents, that work at the UN in New York. These are friends of mine that have children that are living paycheck to paycheck because they may have a wife or a husband at home, and so I think that it's time for both sides of the aisle to get over themselves and to get a real solution here. And this moral imperative that the Democrats think they have, I think, has been washed away. It's time to come to the table.
Is it telling, Judge, that the Democratic measure just to open the government with no money for the wall got 2 more votes in the Senate than the president's plan did?
Yes, it is very telling. I was surprised to see the 6 Republicans in the Senate go for it. But I want to pick up on what Morgan was saying and not address the politics and not address the morality, but just address the Constitution. According to Congressman Will Hurd, former CIA agent and conservative Republican, through whose district most of the wall would pass, the vast majority of that property is not owned by the federal government. The president cannot condemn property on his own. He can't take property on his own. He can only do that with an express authorization from the Congress. And Congressman Hurd says most of my constituents are saying, not in my backyard. What does that mean? That means litigation over the value of each parcel of property. The president could get $7 billion tomorrow. He won't be able to spend it for years until the litigation is over with.
And here's one of the other things about the wall, too, in Texas, because you have to build it out of the Rio Grande floodplain.
Right.
These illegal migrants coming up from Honduras who want to get apprehended by the Border Patrol will simply have to cross the river, put feet on American soil, and it will be like there was no barrier there.
Once their feet are on American soil, they're protected by due process.
So Jonathan, Morgan was saying that tomorrow federal workers will miss their second pay period. And for a lot of people, this really is going to begin to bite. So how do you read the political pressure and how it's growing, and who's it really putting pressure on, Congress or the president?
It's really hard to say because the president is seeing the Coast Guard, for example, not getting paid, and they've tried to hotline a bill to pay them through the Senate. That the military is certainly, Trump sees that as his constituency. He said this publicly, that a lot of these federal workers are Democrats, so he does sort of distinguish in some ways about that. And obviously the Democrats, a lot of these, they see this as their constituents, and particularly members from states with lots of federal workers, Maryland, Virginia, others. So there is pressure on both sides, but the leadership is so dug in. Nancy Pelosi has said that walls themselves are immoral. So for her to then give him money for something called a wall is then off the table, or even, steel slats or whatever.
But so is off the table taking down the immoral wall that already exists along the border.
Sure. But
just trying to have it both ways.
So you now have this situation, and I was talking to someone in the White House today about this, and they're saying, well, Democrats are now saying, maybe we'll give you $5.7 billion for things along the border, but not barriers and wall. Well, that's not going to cut it. That's everything that, except for what Trump really wants.
If you're the president's re-election campaign members and you're watching these past 2 weeks, I think you're elated, because any thought that you had that the Democrats might moderate and nominate someone like Biden and try to be responsible, if this is the behavior that we've seen over the last 2 weeks going into 2020, the president's re-election campaign must feel great.
However, there seems to be a little bit of a disconnect here. I want to jump ahead and replay something that Wilbur Ross said this morning, that even the president said he could have said better, and then the way Wilbur Ross walked it back this afternoon. Listen here.
The banks and the credit unions should be making credit available to them. These are basically government-guaranteed loans. We're aware, painfully aware, that there are hardships inflicted on the individual workers. All I was trying to do is make sure that they're aware that there are possible other things that could help somewhat mitigate their problems.
So it's a judge that the administration is trying to take the moral high ground here to say, we know that workers are hurting, but it's important that we get border security. And then Wilbur Ross comes out and says, well, I don't know why they can't get a loan.
I think he really cut the ground out from under the president there. I mean, the world in which he lives, he can call up his banker and get a loan for almost anything that he wants. But the federal government workers cannot do that. I mean, it's one thing to say, well, you work for the federal government, it's bankrupt, what do you expect? There are times when it can't pay their bills. It's another thing to say, what's wrong with you? Go borrow the money. Nobody accepts that as a reasonable response.
Right. Now, State of the Union. The president had his heels dug in. He sent the note back to Nancy Pelosi yesterday. I'll see you on the 29th as scheduled. She wrote him back, no, you won't. And then we heard that there was going to be a plan B. Late last night, the president tweeted, as the shutdown was going on, Nancy Pelosi asked me to give the State of the Union address. I agreed. She then changed her mind because of the shutdown, suggesting a later date. This is her prerogative. I will do the address when the shutdown is over. I'm not looking for an alternative venue for the State of the Union address. I mean, he got the political capital, Jonathan, of making her disinvite him. Right. But then does he lose by saying, you know what, she's right?
I don't know. I mean, I was it was sort of out of character for Trump, and I texted this to a few. I was like, it was quite surprising to see him do that. And I said, is there some backstory here? Is it political game? The two things I've learned is, one, there were real logistical issues with a lot of these other options, but also more than that, and I heard this from people who discuss this with Trump, is he likes the tradition. He really likes the house.
What bigger venue could he get?
And he didn't want to give up the pomp and the circumstance of the house. So I think that was really the ultimate.
He's got to wait a little while. He's got to wait. All right.